Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this MHS. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this MHS webinar. We're glad that you've joined us today and hope that you find this to be helpful. This is a part of a series that we're offering based on the MHS Valued Leadership website. And today's webinar is entitled Daily Practices for Leadership with Collaboration. And that will be our focus today. And so we're happy that you're here. There we go. If you have technical problems today, please contact Emily Reese at MHS. Her address is on the screen, but Emily at mhsonline.org. Please contact her, and hopefully she can help you. Also, today we will have a question and answer time, and so I hope that you participate in that. At the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A button. Please sign that. Push that if you would like to leave a comment or question, and I hope that you will, so that we can have some discussion after I do some presentation here at the beginning, but please be thinking about that. There will also be a poll that we'd like you to take, which will help us evaluate how we're doing and give us feedback on this kind of thing. So please, that'll pop up at some point and you'll be able to do that. So please, offer your comments. Some of you I know very well, others I don't know well, and I'm happy that both of you are on this webinar, but I'm Emerson Lesher. I'm a Senior Vice President at MHS and have been here for about 3 years in this role. I've also worked in 2 different MHS-related organizations, Messiah Lifeways and Philhaven, and happy to help lead this webinar. The webinar today is based on the website valuedleadership.org that MHS has created and sponsors, and it's based on 4 C's, what we call the 4 C's. And we developed the 4 C's around particular themes that we thought were relevant to the early Anabaptist movement, of which MHS is associated and its organizations. The Anabaptists were a group in Europe in the 1500s, a variety of groups that believed had many things in common. There are also some differences, but many things in common, and became what we think of as Mennonite and Brethren and others today. And so this website attempts to focus on some of those early beliefs and practices and themes, and also those that might be relevant for us today. And we've selected 4 that we think the Anabaptists highlighted and that are also relevant in the 21st century. And the 4 C's are character, collaboration, culture, and change. And last time we talked about character. This time we want to focus in on collaboration. And why did we pick collaboration as one of the 4 C's? I think it is a theme or a topic, a practice that the early Anabaptists emphasized in a variety of ways. And so that was a reason. But for example, they were very strong on building community as a part of their faith expression. So faith was more than just one person. It was a community, and I'll talk more about that. The other is, today we hear much about collaboration, collaborative leadership, collaborative organizations is certainly something that's of interest and encouraged in healthcare and human services. And so we think it makes sense for us to focus on that in our website and on this webinar today. In the website, we define collaboration in this way, and there are 4 elements here that I just wanted to highlight as we think about, well, what is collaboration and what are some of the important ingredients? One is, this may be implied, but collaboration enlarges the circle. It includes other people. It's more than just one. And so that's what we mean by collaboration, is adding to the circle, enlarging the circle. The second aspect would be to engage different perspectives, to realize that there may be different views, different options, different ways, and we want to involve them, engage them, include them, and so that's a part of what we mean by collaboration. A third aspect to collaboration is a shared vision, shared goals, shared expectations, a common direction. and being clear about that, being clear about our expectations and so forth. But part of collaboration is having this shared sense of vision, direction. And finally, collaboration should also imply action. So it's a response. It's responding to something. It's moving forward, responding to hopes and needs of others. So that's a bit of what we mean when we say collaboration. I want to just highlight three ways that I think the early Anabaptist groups thought about collaboration or included that in their thinking, and may help us today. One is that faith is not primarily or only about the individual. It's not the individual experience that they focused on, but also on the group experience, the community, the church. So the individual experience is important because individuals decide to follow Christ, follow Jesus, but it's also joining a community that really, the thought is that Christian faith is creating a new community, a new way of doing things, a new group of people. It's a movement. And so that has a sense of collaboration, of being a part of something. It's more than you. Another way that I think the Anabaptists focused on, stressed collaboration, was mutual aid. And by this, they mean helping others in practical ways. And for them, this was, again, an important part of faith. So it was involving others, interacting with others, supporting others, engaging with others to meet need, and so forth. And so they ranked this up there with baptism, with communion, with other practices, was this idea of mutual aid, of relating to others and helping others. And finally, the Anabaptists stressed what we today think of as the priesthood of believers. Now, other groups in the 1500s also stressed this, the Lutherans and others, but the Anabaptists also particularly pushed this out in ways that I think are helpful to our thoughts about collaboration. And by this, they mean that all people are priests. All people have gifts. God has given everyone unique things that they can share and do and contribute to the whole. And so it's one person cannot do it alone. It's the community. It's the gifts of everyone. So to be whole, to thrive, you need to involve others, engage others in their use of their gifts. And so these are some ways that I think the Anabaptists encouraged collaboration, collaborative activities that may be helpful for us today. I want to talk now specifically about some of the daily practices, or maybe some of the more practical aspects of collaboration. And my starting point is really today is to think more about what might be an attitude of collaboration. We'll talk about some practical things, but I think it's also very important to sort of start with an attitude of collaborative work, collaborative activities. And if you start there, you'll probably start doing it if that's in your mindset, if that's your assumption, that's where you're getting up in the morning. I also want to look at collaboration through several different lenses or places where you might do this. The first one is on decision making. I also want to talk about collaboration internally within the organization, collaboration externally with other organizations. I want to talk a little bit about collaboration with introverts and for introverts, since I'm an introvert, and then some of the pitfalls. So to do all that in about 20 minutes is going to keep me moving, but hopefully that will work well for us. Decision making. Let's talk about that. This is more of an attitude, bringing an attitude to whenever you're making a decision to say to yourself, have I included at least 3 people in this decision? Or when other people come to you with a decision, I would encourage you to ask this question of them or to have them go back and do this. It begins to have people think differently and begin to have more a collaborative leadership approach to decision making. Some of you I know and have heard me talk about this before, but when I was president at Messiah Lifeways, one of the things that I did in the later years that I was there was to say I was only going to make 3 decisions a year. And that may sound extreme, and maybe it was, but it set a tone and an attitude in myself and others that I was not going to be the only decision maker, that there were going to be other people included, and it really helped begin to broaden the circle of decision making. And it related to point number 3 to some extent, are the right people in the room, because it may be that I wasn't the best person to make the decision, and it was really other people that should be making the decision. So in making 3 decisions a year, it didn't mean that I wasn't involved. It didn't mean that I didn't ask questions. It didn't mean that I still held people accountable. I followed up on, how is that decision going? Where are we at? Who's making it? What are the gaps? What are the issues? But it began to have a collaborative aspect to decision making. And so I would encourage you to think about how you're doing that. How are you widening the circle as you make decisions to be more collaborative, and to keep asking, are the right people in the room to make this decision? Is this really appropriate for the people here, or should somebody else be making it and could actually do a better job? I want to talk about collaborating internally within the organization. This might be among teams or among departments, and think in that context. And again, some of this is your attitude of how you start today, but as you look at your schedule each day, to think about who might go with me, who could I include, who could tag along, who could I invite to be a part of this meeting, this event, this decision, and to begin to just broaden that in a natural way within your organization. Also, to encourage multi-directional communication, I would encourage you to think about that. And by multi-directional, I mean often as leaders, as supervisors, we feel the need to push out information. We're sort of sending things out, sharing things, and we need to be doing that. That's important. But it's also important for us to be receiving information, receiving communication. And so as leaders, we need to set up processes that do both, where we can send things out, but we can also receive. And so I would encourage you to be thinking about what are the processes within your own leadership style, within your organization, that encourage that kind of multi-directional communication. And I think that that also sets you up for collaboration. And you begin to learn things and hear things, and you'll begin to do things differently as you have that kind of communication system. One of the things that I did at Messiah Lifeways, just as an example, I know some of you do similar things, is I met regularly with the resident council board. I wanted to meet regularly with the people that we served, and that was just one way. There are other ways, but I did that on a regular basis, and it was more a discussion period. It was questions and comments and learning from each other. It was a pretty open agenda. Another thing that I did to try to receive information was to meet regularly with the same group of frontline employees for a year over lunch, and I also shadowed with them during the year. And so it was a way for me to hear from them. What are their issues? What are their needs? What are they experiencing? So I would encourage you to think about that as well. There are other ways that you can encourage internal collaboration, possibly by asking people who don't normally work together to maybe do a project together. That begins to have people think differently and collaborate in some new ways. I want to just highlight external collaboration as well, some daily practices that you might consider. And again, the first one is really sort of more our attitude as an organization or as a leader, but as we start something new, to ask the question, is there another organization that's already doing this or might be interested in doing it with us, rather than assume that we should go alone or do it alone, or that we can do it best alone, but to really ask this question and to be thinking about it. I wanted to just highlight an example again that I was involved with, and it really relates to the third point here on start experimenting, start small, and sometimes things happen in ways that we're not expecting, and they keep sort of growing. At Messiah Lifeways, we decided to collaborate with Harrisburg Magazine, a local monthly magazine. A lot of cities or communities have such a magazine, and we set up an agreement with them and a relationship where on an annual basis we did what we called the SAGE Awards, which was to recognize older adults in the region who did something unique, who particularly were modeling a new way of aging. And so each year we would recognize 5 to 6 in the magazine, and also had a special dinner gala kind of thing for them and for others. And it became very successful. So that was a collaboration with an organization that maybe you wouldn't think of collaborating. We didn't initially, but it worked well. And from that, I can point to other collaborative things that started to happen that were also related to our mission and really broadened us and got us connected to people and organizations that before we weren't. So out of the SAGE Awards came, it was really helpful when we started the Pathways Institute for Lifelong Learning, which was a lifelong learning institute, not only for our residents, but for the wider community. And actually many of the people in SAGE Awards who received them, they became interested in pathways and really helped to advance that in a variety of ways. And then at some point we decided to start a village aging in place program. And actually a lot of the people in pathways were also interested in what was called connections and helped to start that. They were a guiding group, and they got us connected to a number of different community organizations and people that we did not know before that helped to launch connections. And then from connections, through those relationships, we formed new relationships and actually started to then manage 2 senior centers. I don't think that that would have happened, a number of those things, if we hadn't started small, started experimenting, started to collaborate with people outside the organization, and it has continued to grow. And so I would encourage you to think not only internal collaboration, but external collaboration. I think often we get caught up internally and we don't see the opportunities that are outside, and that we should also be exploring them and thinking about how that might add to who we are as an organization. I want to just include a few comments here for introverts, because I think sometimes when introverts at least hear collaboration, it sounds like an extroverted activity. And extroverts can be very good at initial engagement and getting people together. They're not afraid to make that phone call or to go shake hands or do something. Introverts may be less likely to do that at times. And but introverts also have a role to play and can be helpful collaborators. And so I hope if you're an introvert that you see how you can fit into this, how you can also be a part of this. And I also hope that extroverts can appreciate that and use you in positive ways in the collaborative activities. Because sometimes the people we want to collaborate with are introverts also. And so sometimes having introverts part of it is helpful. One of the things that I have done and still do as an introvert that has helped me in various collaborative settings, getting to know people in meetings and so forth, is to use what I call warm-up questions or check-in questions. Often I'll send these out ahead of time as a part of the agenda, the right in the agenda, and it helps people warm up. One of the messages it communicates is we're all going to share. Everybody is important here. We want to hear from everybody, whether you're introvert or extrovert, whether you talk a lot or not so much, you're important. We want to hear from you. There's other ways that you can develop structured settings to get to know people. One of the things that I did was I decided for a year, every month I was going to invite a community leader to come to the retirement community and have lunch with me. And that was something I was comfortable with. It was my place, in a sense. I knew, and it worked very well. And I developed some good relationships from that were helpful. It would have been hard for me maybe to go out to some other events, but that was one that worked for me. You can, I'm sure, think of other things that might help you as well. If you're an introvert or if you're working with introverts, how they can also be a part of the collaborative activities. And during collaborative activities, it's often helpful to pause, to reflect, and introverts can be particularly helpful in that, in terms of asking some good questions and helping to really shape what's happening and how you move forward. I want to just quickly mention some pitfalls of collaboration, and we also highlight these in the website, Valued Leadership. There's some that are listed there as well. We also list a lot of good things about collaboration, but there's some of the pitfalls. And let me just say, if you haven't gone to the website, lately, or if you've never checked it out, I would encourage you to do it and look at the collaboration page. There's a great video there of by Fran Sparrow at Phil Haven, who talks about how Phil Haven has worked at collaboration, how they've Anabaptist themes and values have influenced that. But there's other resources there, books and questions and stories, and so please check that out as well. One of the pitfalls that we have sometimes, I think, in collaboration is that we think that we're being diverse in who we're including, how we're doing things, but we may not be. And so I would encourage you to really think hard and long about that in terms of how to increase the diversity of thought, not only in terms of culture and race, but other ways of including diverse thinking in as you go about considering collaborative activities. The other thing that Anabaptist organizations sometimes have been accused of, which I'm sure none of yours have been ever accused of this, is the idea of processing forever and never making a decision. So that can be a pitfall of collaboration, that we get together, we talk, we discuss, we study, we plan, but we never actually do anything. And so that is something to be, I think, mindful of, to be and actually plan for, or to list that or to include that in terms of your expectations or guidelines as you go about collaborating either internally or externally, to say, what do we do if we get to a point where we're not really moving forward? What's next? How do we handle that? What do we do? Or to even say, if we're not successful in the next, whatever, 4 weeks or 6 months, whatever the appropriate timeline is, to say we're going to stop, or we're going to at least have a major assessment of where are we and what's holding us up. Because over-processing, I think, can be one of the pitfalls of collaborative activities. The other is that sometimes we get stuck around conflict, and sometimes we're surprised that there is conflict, that all of a sudden it comes up, or when conflict does come up, we think that the collaborative relationship needs to end, and that may be true, but it may also not be true. It may be just that you need to work through it, and if you do, you'll actually get to sort of transform it into a new level, a new plane that you can really move forward. So I would say, conflict in and of itself should be expected. It shouldn't be a sign that the collaboration should end, but it's certainly something that needs to be dealt with and needs to be expected. You need to realize from the beginning it's going to happen. And it relates to one of the previous slides that I talked about, where I mentioned on the slide about a third way. I think in collaboration, when we start collaboration, we need to realize something new is going to emerge if this is a true collaboration. It's not going to be, the collaboration will not be our way or their way. It's going to be a new way, a third way. And so to expect that, to look for the third way, to embrace that, to realize what we're creating here is new and different. It's not, again, their way or our way. It's a new way. And I think that can be helpful as you begin to set the expectations related to conflict and what's going to happen as you enter into this collaborative relationship. A couple of final comments here, and then we're going to go to some questions, which I hope we have some, or some comments. But just to go back, what do the Anabaptists have to teach us, or how might we use what they were thinking in this venture related to collaboration? One is to resist the urge to go alone. Again, the Anabaptists thought that faith was not only about the individual, but it was about the community. It's about working with others. And so as organizations, as leaders, we often think we need to do it alone, that we, for whatever reason, we get stuck on that. I think I see that a lot in my own life and other people, where we think we do it the best way or the only way, and it's easy to go alone. And so I think the Anabaptists would encourage us to resist that temptation. The second point is similar, is that The Anabaptists would say that relationships, building community, relationships, may be just as important as other things, and they might say more important than knowledge, than money. You could even say power, possibly. Um, that relationships can be the foundation to move an organization forward. And that's, I think, a central tenet of what the Anabaptists believe, that the church is the center of life, those relationships, creating that community. And so I would encourage you to see how that might influence what you do and how you do it. And finally, collaboration may be difficult, and it often is. It may take more time, it takes more energy at the beginning, but hopefully the reward is greater. The end result actually takes you to a new place that you hadn't been before. So those are some ways I think the Anabaptists might want to influence our thoughts, our practice on collaboration. Well, what are your questions, comments? I think Emily is going to chime in here and share some of those, and then we'll try to respond or see what you are thinking.
Hi, Emerson. You do have one question. The first question is, what are ways to bring out different points of view when there's groupthink?
Yeah, can you say that more clearly? At least for me, it was a little bit muffled.
The first question is, what are ways to bring out different points of view when there's groupthink?
What are different ways to bring out different points of view when there's groupthink? Good. Thank you for that question. Well, actually, you know, there's been research coming out recently that sometimes groupthink does limit what we do rather than, or let me say it this way, a group process can lead to groupthink rather than really moving us forward and help us be creative in what we do and how we do it. So it's a good question, and sorry I'm having some technical problems. There we go. I think one is to keep asking the question, you know, do we have the right people in the room? And to keep bringing different people into the room so that it's not always the same people doing the thinking. So it helps to, that's one way I think of reducing the group think, or to have the group actively think about what are 3 different ways that we could solve this problem. Some of you have been involved with various kinds of 6 hats or other processes that you might use in decision-making settings and collaborative settings to really encourage the group to think beyond the obvious. I had a supervisor once who say there's always, you know, there's 3 solutions to every problem. And so you should always be thinking about, well, what are the 3 different solutions to this problem? And I think if groups do that, it can be very helpful to them. So, is there another question?
We do have one more question. Do you have any stories of collaboration that went bad?
Well, that I can talk about, I guess. Is that the? Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I would have the some typical ones. I think that I'm not sure I should share entirely. Where I think there were different expectations, where people thought that they were coming together around the same issues, and they weren't. I think I can think of one where I think it was collaboration was hindered because of the personalities, the people, which probably shouldn't surprise us, but where some people were, and I hinted at this in the one slide, some people in the who were around the table were willing to yield to others, but others weren't willing to yield. And I think because one person in particular was not willing to yield to the group broke up. So you could say, well, maybe that was okay. The person wanted to stand their ground on that issue, and but the collaboration didn't move forward. So I think, and I think some of that was just personality and was style. So you can look at that in different ways, I think, and say, well, if we would have tried harder or pushed forward, maybe we could have overcome that. And I think that could be true. It also can be a sign that, yeah, this is not a collaboration to keep putting energy into. And it is time to back up and walk away and maybe bring a different set of people to the table. So I think a lot of that is, trying things, learning, and realizing that it's okay to experiment on some of this and to see what you learn and decide when it's time to move forward, when it's time to back up. So I'm not sure that's a good answer, but that's some thoughts about that.
Okay, I do have one more question. In a small org with a limited leadership team, collaboration is more difficult. Any suggestions of how to address this?
Yeah, it would be helpful just to have a little bit more information on that. I mean, I think internally, it may be more difficult. It depends on, I guess, what you want to accomplish or what the lead, if it's the leader asking that question, it may be that they should, again, depending on what they want to do, what the collaborative aspect is to form relationships outside, and they may find that that's helpful as a leader to meet with other leaders, and they may learn from that experience, or it may be a group that meets regularly that they can share information, not unlike some of the groups that MHS has for a variety of leaders. But there would be, in a local setting, that might happen. I think inside, it would be helpful for me to know, I guess, sort of the purpose of that collaborative activity. But making sure that you have ways, even in small organizations, to include the voice of those you serve and the voice of team members, of people. And I think even in small organizations, that's important to pay attention to, or to make sure that you have that. And you may be doing it already. I mean, as you think about it, you may find that actually we're doing a lot of things that we've talked about today, just because you are smaller, and sometimes it does happen more naturally.
Okay, we have one more question. Do you have any thoughts about Anabaptist organizations collaborating with organizations from other faith traditions?
Sure. I think that can be very appropriate. I gave one example already where we, partnered with, in some ways on a small scale, with a magazine, and it led to other things. So I think that can be appropriate. Again, I think listing what are our expectations, what do we want to come from this, how will this influence our practice long term. If it's a more significant collaboration where you're getting into shared services or governance, I think that can still be appropriate, but it's obvious that you need to be clear about your faith perspective, how you're going to implement that, how you're going to integrate that, what the other party is willing to accept, and so forth. So I think a lot of that is just being clear about the expectations, talking about it, and not surprising either party. But in the day in which we live, I think we already, in many ways, are collaborating with all kinds of people and all kinds of groups. So it's getting better at it. It's being more intentional about how we do it. I mean, most MHS organizations collaborate with the government, whether they want to or not. It's really a collaboration. And so you can decide how you want to handle that. But we collaborate with a lot of different organizations. And so, yeah, I think it's being clear, knowing what sort of how far we're willing to go or not go, and then working around that. Well, I think we're at the end here, or when we said we would stop. There's a couple things I want to do yet. We do have an extra credit item. Again, we had this the last time, and we have another extra credit for you. at your next team meeting or board meeting, I would encourage you to use one or all three of these questions to follow up on this. Maybe look at the website and then engage your group around one of these. How are you encouraging collaboration in your organization? You probably are already, but just to recognize that and to say, gee, yeah, we're actually doing this in a lot of good ways. Or to ask the question, what's preventing us from collaborating, both internally and externally? What are the gaps? What are the issues? Why isn't that happening? And or to say, hey, let's pick an experiment. Let's pick something that we think we can be successful at in collaborating, both either internally or externally, and let's move forward and give it a try. So that's the extra credit question, and if you get that right, I don't know, somebody will give you a candy bar or something. I guess you'll have to let us know. And thank you for joining today. Check out the website. There's a blog you can sign up for that comes out occasionally. Soon, if not already, a feedback survey or a poll will pop up on your screen or be available to you. But we also invite you to come to the next webinar, which is on September the 1st at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the next one will be on culture. That's the third C, is culture. And we hope that you sign up and invite others to come and participate. So have a great day, and wherever you are in the world, I hope you're having a good day. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.